Dave Savage here. Everybody on this call has a few things in common. First and foremost, every time a family gets into mortgage debt, we want to make sure they understand their options, not just their monthly payment, but what is the cost of that loan over time. And we want to do that in a way that turns mortgage advice into a competitive advantage. I've got a super special guest today, Leif Babin. Leif, welcome to the call. I'm very excited about today's interview.
Thanks for having me, Dave. Looking forward to
Well,
talking to you.
yeah, no, I'm looking forward to the conversation. I've seen you on stage. I've not only read your book, but I over the past week to 2 weeks I went through the audiobook, and I would just say that was like an entire new level experience. It's actually my first audiobook, and I have a feeling that when I listen to other audiobooks, it's going to be a letdown after that one. So.
I appreciate that. They did a great job with the audiobook. I was impressed with the sound effects they added and all that. They did a great job with it.
Yeah, well, as I told you, I'm going to follow up from some takeaways from last week, and then we'll get into the interview. So just give me another 2 minutes to set it up. So Mortgage Coach members, I want to remind you guys about last week's call. It's important that calls like last week, we don't just run by them. Like you consume that content, you took some notes, and now you forgot about it. So Greg did a really nice job. This guy consults with CEOs, he consults with leadership teams about change management. Last week's call was all about how do we get loan officers to use technology, a tool to be more successful so that when they're quoting rates, they're providing graphs and charts, whether they're forwarding it to a first-time home buyer, whether a family's coming into their office, they're good at using their mobile device as a tool. And then, probably the most challenging thing that we talked about last week is just the concept of using your mobile phone to create a video that helps the family understand their options. So I just want to make sure if you were on that call, make sure you review your notes before today is out. We did drive a couple homework assignments last week. I don't know how many of you guys did it, but I wanted to remind everybody to listen to the Scripps call from last year. This is one of the best calls of last year. I will put a link to this as another reminder in chat. And then we also talked about the Gaylord Hansen team and their 5 realtor strategies. So if you didn't do the homework, you didn't follow through on that, make sure you do. By the way, Leif, all 3 of these guys were at your first muster a couple months ago. So I don't know if you recognize any of those faces, but they're huge fans of your book, and they brought, I think there was 6 of them that came to the muster. I don't know if you had a lot of mortgage people there, but
I do. I do recognize those faces, and we had a lot of mortgage folks there. It was outstanding. We had an incredible group of people there.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get a whole new round of Mortgage Coach leaders at your next muster.
Sandy.
Right on. So hey, one last setup, and then we're going to get into today's call. When I did that call with Darren Hardy a couple weeks ago on January 10th, we brought in Muddy, and he created some visual notes. To me, that was a super important call to kick off 2017, and I think today's interview really warrants that same type of focus. So we do have Muddy creating some notes in between some of the Q&A. I'm going to pull these notes up, and then we will make these available from our Facebook page after today's call. So stay tuned. And also, Muddy is actually going to be creating these notes with a video cam on him from Facebook Live. So check it out. We'll put a link to that in the conversation. I'm not going to focus on it throughout the whole call because I really want to focus on Leif. So as much as possible, we're going to focus on Leif, and then in between questions, we'll pull up the visual notes. So for those of you that don't know Leif Babin, I mean, this is a really important guy. This is an American hero. This is a former Navy SEAL. Him and his partner Jocko Willink have created a book called Extreme Ownership. I think just the title itself is game-changing. When I first got this book, I just wanted to hand it out to everybody. And then the more I got into the book, I just realized, it's just all about me. This is a book that I need to read, reread. And in preparation for today's interview, I actually listened to the audiobook over the past couple of weeks, and just an important message. So Leif, thanks for making time for us. I think let's just get right into extreme ownership. Why did you guys write this book, and what does extreme ownership mean to you?
Thanks, Dave. We wrote the book really just due to demand signal. I mean, Jocko and I were not guys who had planned to write a book, and frankly, that's kind of frowned on in the SEAL teams. We take pride being the quiet professionals, but we had come back from some really intense urban combat in what was called the Battle of Ramadi in 2006, and we brought a lot of lessons learned, some very, very lessons from the battlefield. Jocko and I had helped build and run leadership training for the next generation of SEAL leaders. And that's what we do now with our company, Echelon Front, is take those same principles we learned on the battlefield and apply them to any team, in any situation, in business, in the mortgage industry, across any industry. And as we worked with different companies, we had so many people saying, do you have this written down somewhere? Is there a reference that we can use, that we can utilize when you're not here talking to us about this stuff? And we created a workbook that we used with a few companies we worked with over the long term, and then eventually it became the book Extreme Ownership. And of all the things we title, of all the things we could have titled the book, of all the things that we talk about, the reason we decided to use the title Extreme Ownership is because that's really the fundamental mindset upon which everything else is built. It's really the foundation that's most important. And what extreme ownership means is that there's nobody else to blame. There's no excuses. You got to own everything in your world, and not just everything that you're responsible for, but everything that impacts your mission. And when you take that kind of attitude where it's on you to get problems solved, and not just to say, hey, my bad, when you own mistakes, when bad things happen, but actually come up with a solution to deliver a better outcome so that you can win, the team can win, everybody wins. That's really what extreme ownership is all about.
Love it, love it. So I wanted to focus this call on just creating a sales culture of accountability. In the mortgage business, when you really look at teams, it's not that common. Now, when you look at the best teams, you have got a lot of accountability. When you look at the most successful loan officers, you've got a lot of accountability around prospecting. That's the thing we have to do a lot. But when you think of accountability, what are some of the key takeaways from the book that might apply most to our audience in creating that sales culture?
Well, I think people talk about accountability a lot in the business world, and of course, it's a term that's used in the military as well. I think generally what that means when people are talking about it, though, is like, well, we've got to hold people accountable for not doing their jobs, but it's almost like a blame game on everyone else. And I think the most important piece of accountability is holding yourself accountable. And that's really what extreme ownership is about. It's really easy to think, well, if other people had extreme ownership, if other people took ownership of these issues, if other people solved problems, then my life would be easier, my job would be easier. But that's not the way this works. And the most important aspect of this is you. So you have to have accountability for yourself. And we talk about when it comes to accountability, when it comes to standards, it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. I think that's something that people write that down like it's really profound. When I wrote that in the book, I've had so many people put that up on banners on the walls. It's pretty simple. There's nothing too complex about that. It's not what you preach, what you tolerate, but it's just a truth that's reality that you have to deal with. And the most important place that you can't tolerate less than substandard behavior is in yourself. So you have to make sure that you hold those standards high. If you expect, you got to do your due diligence and your homework. The prospects that you're talking about, making sure that you're building relationships with the other folks that you depend on to actually close those deals and get mission accomplished. And instead of just pointing fingers and say, oh, I did my part, but I'm waiting on this person over there or this person, they didn't do their part. You actually have to get that. You have to go build a relationship, work with those people, get it done, and that's really what extreme ownership is about. So for accountability, I think the most important thing in accountability is in yourself. If I'm not showing up to work on time, if I'm not making a phone call that I know I should make to follow up, if I'm not actually doing my due diligence to make sure this paperwork is squared away, if I'm not reaching out and passing information to people to make sure they understand why it's critical that we get this done at this particular time, that's on me, and I got to do a better job of that. And so obviously with a team of folks, you got to make sure that your team is meeting those standards, and it's not what you preach with tolerate. It certainly applies to the team as well, but it all starts with you, and I think that's the most important aspect of that.
Love it, love it. So folks, you guys are going to get a chance to, one, ask some questions, Two, I know in the Mortgage Coach community, a lot of folks have read this book. So one, if you've read the book and you have a favorite quote, please share that in questions. I would love to bring more quotes that you love from the book into this conversations. And also, if you have a question for Leif, while I've got I've got a number of questions to ask. Many of these have come from Mortgage Coach leaders. I reached out to a lot of CEOs that are incredibly well known, incredibly successful in the mortgage industry, told them I was having this interview, and I've got a lot of questions, but I would love to get your questions. So if you're on this call, you have a quote, share it. You have a question, share it. And if you have an extreme ownership success story, share that too. Looking forward to having it. Also, Muddy, I am not seeing you on Facebook. I know that you're rocking it out somewhere, but if you could put a link in the GoToWebinar chat so that we can make that available, and I want to kind of see where you're at with some of the notes so far. So let's move on to the next question here. And the most important part of leadership, and maybe it's extreme ownership, so maybe I already jumped on it, but what are some of the most important decisions you make as a leader of your organization?
Well, I think the most important aspect of leadership, we always talk about that, like what's the most important quality, what's people always want to try to simplify that down. I think it goes along with extreme ownership, and that is the humility. You got to have humility. You've got to be able to keep your ego in check, and that seems pretty simple because ego is a great driver for performance. I know we have a lot of Mortgage Coach participants here that are some outstanding people doing amazing things. Some of those successful people in the industry, and that's outstanding. And ego drives you to want to be better than everybody, to make more money than other people, to set a new standard and be able to do some things that others can't do. And it was the same thing for us in the SEAL teams. We wanted to be able to go take on some missions that other people thought were impossible or were too dangerous or there was no way we could possibly get that done. Those are the missions I want to take on. And I love having that kind of aggressive mentality. But ego can drive you to do great things, but ego can also be the most destructive force out there. And for Jocko and I, as we work with companies across any industry, 99.9% of problems are due to ego, where someone's ego is, they can't keep their ego in check, and that's usually where those silos develop and a communication breakdown happens, or you start blaming things on other people that really were your fault, and it's your ego, or you're pursuing a strategy that's not delivering the results that you need, but you're just going to continue to pursue that strategy because you want to prove you're right. And you can't admit that, like, what, actually this isn't getting it done. We better do something different. Let's redirect that. And so that's really the biggest thing. We talk about it's be humble or get humbled. You really are going to be humbled by life, by experience. Nobody has all the answers. Nobody has it figured out. So I think that humility piece is absolutely critical, because when you don't have humility, you can't listen to other people. Somebody else comes up with a great idea or wants to implement some technology or teach you something. I mean, whether it's learning from your, through the Mortgage Coach program or others that you work with and your peers or others on your team, you can't listen to people if you got a big ego and you're not humble. You don't listen to anybody because you got it all figured out. You can't educate yourself. You can't learn. You can't grow. And most importantly, you don't have the ability to self-assess. And this is really the critical aspect of why it's important to be humble, so that you can look in the mirror and say, okay, what do I need to do better? Where did I screw up? What are the mistakes that I made? Or maybe our team did great, but where can we get even better? You got to have that sometimes brutally honest self-assessment. And that's something that you have to do all the time. And I think that's really the key to the best SEAL units out there, have leaders that are doing that brutally honest self-assessment of themselves, of the team. The best military units in the Army and Marine Corps that we worked closely with, they were doing that as well. And now the best leaders in any industry across the business world that we've worked with over the last 5 years, and we're probably pushing 200 companies that Jocko and I have worked with, and hundreds of leaders at this point, they all have that. They all are able to check their ego, look in the mirror and say, okay, where do we need to get better? How can we improve? So I think that's the most important thing that you got to think about. Great, be proud of the job that you're doing, be proud of what you accomplished. That's great, but you got to be thinking about how you can get even better all the time.
Love it. Well, first of all, Great answer, folks. Love all the quotes that are coming in. Love all the questions that are coming in. Leif, I'm going to go a little unscripted because we're getting such great questions. So, I started the whole thing out, around creating this culture of accountability, and you said it's all about you, and how often it turns into the blame game. We talked about it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. I've got some questions that are going a couple different directions, but lots of times, a team member may not be doing what they're supposed to be doing, but the manager didn't make it clear enough to them, or didn't explain the why. And I know you guys cover this a lot in the book around, the importance of planning, the importance of communicating a plan so that it can be remembered. And I don't want to I don't want to put too much in this question, but I do want to kind of lead you, because I also want to get into that. Hey, you got to have a good plan, and you got to prioritize and execute. So why don't you share, like, if you want to have someone who's implementing and executing, give us some feedback on how to give direction and how to make sure they understand what the requirements are.
Got to keep it simple. That's really the key. And as Jocko and I talk about, this stuff is everything that we wrote about in the book is simple but not easy. It's simple. It's elemental. It's not complex, but it is very difficult to implement in reality and in real life. And that's one of the things that people actually that it's the mark of an inexperienced leader. And I learned this the hard way, is when you make things really complex and people don't understand it. Because if people don't understand the mission, if people don't understand what it is they're trying to accomplish and why, they can't execute. They just simply can't execute. And it's really easy. I was one of those leaders as a young junior officer in the SEAL teams, where I'd put together a really complex plan, and I put all these PowerPoint slides together and tell people that, hey, we're going to go out and here's what we're going to do. And I gave them all the information, and now we go out on the training battlefield, and it's just a total disaster, and everything falls apart, and I'm just angry at everyone, blaming people. And I come back and it's easy to just cast blame and say, well, I told you what to do, but you didn't do it. Why is that? Now, the reality is, and I'm sure that's happened to every single person that's listening to this call, right? Where you get frustrated. I made it clear. I made it explicitly clear to you, and you didn't do it. Or you did something totally different, or we didn't execute in the way that we should have. And the reality is, look, is it because your people are stupid? No, of course not. Is it because they're just they do, they want to undermine your authority and sabotage you? Of course not. So it in almost every case, it's just simply because you weren't clear. Even if you thought you were clear, you weren't clear about what you needed them to do. So in the planning phase, that's the really important part, is that everybody has to understand that mission, and you have to simplify things down in a way that people can get it and understand it. And the real test for whether or not you've done that right is very simple. It is that they get it. And if a team gets it, if they understand it, you've done it right. You've been simple, you've been clear, you've been concise. If you haven't, if they don't get it, then you haven't done it right. You got to figure out a way to do it right. We talk about in extreme ownership, there's really only two measures that matter. That's effective and ineffective. So if you're ineffective, you got to figure out a way to become effective. So if you're communicating to your team and they don't get it and they don't understand it, then you've got to figure out a way to do it where it is effective and they actually get it and they understand. Now, there will be members of the team that just are not going to be able to perform or not going to be able to meet the standard, and that's always something that you have to wrestle with. And ultimately, sometimes leaders are going to have to make those tough decisions to ultimately let people go. But most people don't need to be fired; they just need to be led. And it's not so don't get frustrated with them. If people aren't doing what you need them to do, you need to look at yourself first and say, okay, let me go back to the drawing board. How can I communicate that more effectively? And one of the examples that I can give you on this, Jocko and I have talked about this on the Jocko podcast, and it's something that it was that I learned. Most people are going to be doing, if members of your team are doing something and you think they're not doing what they need to do, they probably don't know that. They probably think they're doing what they should be doing. Most people don't want to, they want to be part of a winning team. They want to succeed. And they may just have some training scars, or they may just got some bad information, or they're going to keep doing the same thing they've always done unless they're told otherwise and explain why why they need to do it a different way. And one of the ways I learned that was Jocko and I were working together. He was my immediate boss as our task unit commander, in charge of our SEAL task unit of two SEAL platoons of 16 men each and a 5-man headquarters element. and I was in charge of one of those SEAL platoons. So I had 16 guys in my SEAL platoon, and we're working on what we call close quarters combat. We're moving through what's called a kill house with ballistic walls, and we're shooting at targets, and there's a lot of pressure on you to move through the hallways and learn how to work together as a team as you clear rooms. And we do it live fire against targets. We do it against role players with paint rounds shooting back at us. So it's great training. It's very realistic training. It prepares us for combat. And I deployed to Iraq before, but I had never done this mission, which was, what we call our capture kill mission in real life, when Jocko had done a whole bunch of these in real life, had just come back from Iraq. And so I was in the back taking a report where we're counting up the number of, hostages rescued, or bad guys killed, or SEALs wounded, or unknowns, just a civilian that we've detained, and we're trying to figure out who they are. And that's you have it on your arm, on a little arm sleeve card, like a quarterback wears in football. And I was in the back taking that report. And that's exactly what I thought I was supposed to be doing. Here I am, an aggressive leader. This is my job to take this report. I'm going to do this report better than anybody else. And Jocko sees me in the back. And meanwhile, I've got guys spread out throughout the kill house. And there's guys, that are 50 yards ahead of me. And I have no idea what's going on up there. And he just said, hey, Leif, why are you in the back? And I said, well, that's where I was told to be. I mean, isn't this where I'm supposed to be? And I was getting defensive, like, hey, well, why are you asking me that question? That's kind of isn't this my job? It's where I'm supposed to be. That's what I've been told by, a platoon chief, that I needed to be there in, previous platoon, and that was my job. And I was determined, I'll be damned to do this job better than anybody else. And then Jocko asked me, well, do you know what's going on in the front of the train right now? The guys that are way ahead of you in the house, 30, 40, 50 yards away. And I was like, I have no idea what's going on up there. It's like, well, how can you be their command and control for those guys if you don't know what's going on up there? And it was a great question. It was a light bulb went off in my head of, wow, this is not where I'm supposed to be. I can't actually lead my team. And if I'm not in a position where I'm more forward so I can actually know what's going on up front. Now, if I'm the leader, I can't get so far forward that I get sucked into every room clearance. And, I'm wrestling with prisoners because I need to be the command and control. I need to be the person that's stepped back and is kind of seeing the bigger picture of things. But if I'm tucked in the back, I can't help my team. So I'm actually failing as a leader, and I'm failing my team. And that was just a great way. I mean, he never needed to tell me that. Again, I moved forward to the bulk of my forces where I could actually be the command and control for my team. And I thought I was doing exactly what I was supposed to do. So he didn't yell at me. He didn't come in and say, what the hell are you doing back here? It makes no sense. Why are you doing this? He asked me a legitimate question of like, why are you back here? Did you know something that I don't know? Is there a reason for that? And then it helped me understand that I was not as effective as I needed to be, and I couldn't actually be the command and control for my team unless I was actually further forward. So, when you're frustrated with your team and they're not doing what you think they should be doing, again, take a look at yourself and think, okay, how can I get them to understand that I need them to do something differently? Help explain that to them in a way that they're going to accept it. They're going to get that. They're going to take that constructive criticism and run with it. And then, Jocko never needed to tell me that again. So he could go worry about other stuff because he knew I had it and I was going to run it. I was going to have effective command and control for my team. So that's the kind of thing that you need to think about for your teams. That don't go yell at people. Don't go get angry and agitated. They're probably doing what they think they need to do. So it's your job as a leader to help them do what they need to do so that they can accomplish their mission and that your entire team can accomplish its mission so everybody can win.
So another thing you talk about in the book is just how much you include the front line in the planning. So it's not as though, at the top, you're figuring out what to do, how to do it, and pushing it down. I like I said, let's just focus on one thing, like prospecting. So often managers will just say, hey, you need to prospect 2 hours a day, and maybe either not communicate the why enough, not include the front line in enough detail so that they own it. If you could just speak to, how you guys planned in the teams, how much you included the front line, and then maybe even how you iteratively improved the plan until you were getting the results you want.
That's a great question, Dave, and I think it's a real misconception that people have about the SEAL teams is that the senior guy comes in. You know, you watch a movie like Navy SEALs, you know, from 1990 with Charlie Sheen and Michael Biehn, if you remember that movie. Just some great, awesome cheeseball lines in there that we love to quote on actual combat operations. You know, or other movies, you know, that have come out, TV shows, things like that. And it's always the senior guy comes in, tells everybody what they're going to do, you know, he asks if there are any questions. There's never any questions, and they go out and they execute. And it just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way at all, because if I'm dictating a plan to someone and they don't know why they're doing it, then they can't step up and they can't lead. So they're just going to sit there and wait for me to make a call, and I can't be everywhere. If I'm leading a 16-man SEAL platoon, let's say I've got you know, we got some add-ons, so I've got a 24-man assault force and maybe a dozen Iraqi soldiers that are going out with us, you know, and there's vehicles that we're riding in, and there's aircraft that are supporting us overhead, and we're talking back to a tactical operations center. I can't be everywhere all the time, so I've got to have leaders that can step up and lead, and the best way to get those leaders to do that is have them develop their own little piece of the plan. People talk about buy-in all the time. This is a big buzzword in the I don't know if you guys use it so much in the mortgage industry, certainly, but it's all over everywhere else. How do I create buy-in with my team? So in the example of prospecting, how do I create buy-in? How can I get them to understand that it's important for them to go out and prospect and why that's important? And if you're developing the plan of saying, here, you go do this, well, you're not getting buy-in from people because they don't know why they're doing it, and they don't maybe fully understand. Even if it seems obvious to you, they probably don't fully understand why that's important and how it's going to benefit them and benefit the team in the long run. So the best way you can create buy-in is to give people ownership. You got to give people ownership. So as a leader, you should give broad guidance and say, here's what we want to do. Here's why prospects is important. We need to go out and get it. You know, we need to spend as much prospecting time a day as we can, and you know, 2 hours is, I think, the minimum. Here's what we need to do, and then help people develop a plan. And that's how it works for us. You give the junior personnel the ability to develop their little piece of the plan. Whether it's the guy who's running the close air support, talking to aircraft, he's going to come up with the way we're going to talk to the aircraft and make sure he understands the nets. He's going to actually brief that team. He's going to brief that piece of it to the entire team, or the breacher, who's the guy that is, you know, carrying explosives or having the mechanical equipment like chainsaws or sledgehammers that can enter a doorway. And he's going to control the scene. He's going to have his 4-man entry team. He's going to walk them through that and come up with his plan for the breach scene, and control everything that goes on in and around that doorway when they get up to the entry point that we're planning. So that is, I need that guy to own that. I need that guy to run that, and he can. You know, I can redirect that if he's not. If he comes up with a plan that's not meeting the standards that we need it to meet, if it's not, you know, if it's not as effective as I think it would be, I need to help him make that plan become more effective. And you keep, you know, what we call left and right limits. Those are the boundaries within which, you know, I need this plan to be executed, because there's always going to be a limited time. There's always going to be limited resources, you know, all those things. So you have to make sure that plan matches up and meets, falls within and helps develop the overall strategic plan that we're trying to accomplish. But people have to be empowered to plan their piece of the mission. And then in the planning process, you also want to have it interactive, so where if there's someone says, hey, we're going to start the mission at this time, and you know, and I'm brief. Let's say I'm briefing that piece to my team. I need somebody to be able to raise their hand and say, you know what, boss, we've got some assets, some aircraft that are checking on station that are 30 minutes after you're saying the mission is going to start. Can we roll that? You know, is there a way we can adjust that? So it's a very interactive piece, and I don't want that guy to remain silent and sit on his hand and not ask a question. I need that guy to be able to raise his hand, because there are a lot of things I'm going to miss as the leader. So we need people to be able to interact that and have it, you know, have that as part of the plan. Now, obviously, at the end of the day, there's, you know, if you've got 10 different people standing around the sand table trying to develop a plan, or the whiteboard, you're going to have 10 different plans, and someone's, you know, the leader's got to be able to make the call and say, okay, this is why we're going to execute. And everybody else has to be able to go out and execute that plan as if it were their own plan. But if people aren't doing what you need them to do, and they're not bought into the fact that why prospecting is important, or they're not spending enough time and effort, or they're not doing it effectively, then you need to give them ownership, empower them, maybe let some of the most effective junior people that are doing that run some training and help develop that plan, and then help them understand why. If they understand why, then they can actually execute. And they're much more committed to going and making it happen, whether it's prospecting or anything else.
So that brings up another point. I mean, here at Mortgage Coach, everybody on this call, they wouldn't be here if either they didn't invest themselves or their company wasn't investing for our technology. So think of it like as a tool. We're a tool for a loan officer to deliver better advice to a family. But and it's pretty simple, but it does require, new habits. So everybody on this call has this tool. Now, some people use the tool more effectively than others. Some people build the habit so that they do it all the time versus, I just do it when I need to. Kind of taking some of your, some of what you've learned from the SEALs, some of what you're bringing to companies where they're trying to adopt new tools. It's like, let's just assume they've communicated the why, they've got buy-in, and now it's just a question of creating those habits, doing it. Any advice or any of your principles from the book come to mind, or any stories from businesses that you've helped where they really rolled out a new technology and they crushed it? They got great adoption. Anything that might be helpful?
I think it starts with that humility piece, right? If you feel like, well, I'm doing good enough, then you're never going to actually take the steps to actually try to get better and implement new technology and utilize some new tactics, and reach out to other people that are maybe better or more effective at doing this so they can help you do it to become even more effective. And so I think that's where that humility piece, that's really the foundation that allows you to kind of open up and start thinking about this. And that's another big misconception, that SEALs or other special operations units in the military have this, they have a certain way of doing things. The reality is we're innovating and adapting all the time, and we're constantly we're constantly adjusting our tactics. The enemy will adjust their tactics, and we're constantly adjusting our tactics, and that requires bringing in new technology that gives us an advantage. And then once the enemy adjusts to that, then we have to continue to adjust all the time. And one way of doing that is you come back from an operation. We did what we call a post-op debrief, where we're going to talk through every aspect of that operation in a very simple, very clear, very concise meeting that lasted maybe 20 or 30 minutes, because we had a lot of other stuff to do. Paperwork. We got to start planning for the next operation. We got to eat some chow. We got to actually sleep at some point as well. But we'd actually talk through that, and talk through from the planning phase through execution, what went right, what went wrong, what's the enemy doing now that we hadn't foreseen, how can we learn from that, how can we adjust our standard operating procedures. So that's something that's very critical that you have to do all the time, of that brutally honest self-assessment that I was talking about previously. And then to your point, Dave, what we had to do is you take the lessons from that and you plug it into your training program. And so we'd plug it into rehearsals and into planning for the next operation, so that we would adjust and do it all the time. And people are going to get, this is where leaders really have to drive those standards, and it really comes back to, it's not what you preach, what you tolerate. If you want to be good, what Jocko talks about in chapter 12 of the book, discipline equals freedom. If you want the freedom to perform at the highest level possible, you have to have the discipline to do the hard work, and you got to be able to do it over and over and over and over and over again. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And we saw this. The best SEALs are the guys who come into work early. They're working on their gear all the time. They're always making adjustments. They're always practicing their tactics, and they stay late. And those are the best SEALs. Those are the best operators. It's not because they're naturally gifted or better than anybody else. Some of them are, but even folks who are naturally gifted are going to get other people who are disciplined and do the work are going to run circles around them eventually. That's just the way it is. So you have to do that all the time. And the team will complain about that, when you're, little things for us. Like we're getting in and out of the back of like this huge, giant flatbed truck with these huge 1/4-inch steel panels welded on the side and sandbags in the floor that we would set up to try to protect us, give us some kind of protection from IEDs. But you got to swing this big heavy door open, and I got 20 guys have to jump out of the back of this thing, climb down a ladder with some Iraqi soldiers. And as you can imagine, they're pretty vulnerable while they're doing that. So I don't want it to take 2 minutes for us to do that. I need it to take 30 seconds. And the only way for us to do that is we got to rehearse it. And we got to practice it. We got to practice it and practice it and practice it and practice it. And about the 25th, 30th time that you've done that, you're able to do it in 30 seconds. It's no problem. And most people complain about that or say, why are we doing this so many times, or why is that important? And if you can explain to them that, listen, if you're getting shot at while we're getting out of the back of this truck, 30 seconds is going to be the difference between, us getting 10 guys killed, or us actually being able to get out and actually set security and get guns, keeping the enemy's heads down and preventing anybody from getting killed. So it's a huge deal, and it's a game changer. And that's, you got to do the work. You got to make sure that your team is disciplined. If you want freedom, you want the freedom to excel at a high level, you got to be disciplined, and discipline equals freedom. That's just, if you need more about that, go back and review that chapter in Extreme Ownership, chapter 12. But it's just a reality that you have to deal with. You got to do the hard work, and you got to push your team to meet those standards and help them understand why it's important to achieve those standards.
Love it. So, folks, did you take all that? I mean, they're rehearsing 25 times as a team, and then debriefing. And it's such a powerful tool, and in business and life. So when I look at the loan officers and the teams that have been successful at Mortgage Coach, I mean, we always say 20 times, sometime after you've done a total cost analysis 20 times, hey, you one, you know how to do it tactically. Two, you've kind of got the marbles out of your mouth. Three, you've gotten feedback from the marketplace. So you just gotta get the reps in. Last week, Greg talked about the 30 hurdles. So for all the executives on this call, there's 30 hurdles over time, and debrief. It's the key to success. So you talked about discipline equals freedom, and obviously we want to get everybody to read this book. I want to get a big showing of Mortgage Coach members at the muster, your next muster. But talk about that your philosophy about discipline equals freedom a little bit, because I do think it applies to all the change we're trying to drive in the mortgage industry right now.
Well, that philosophy just enabled us to excel at such a great level. And freedom and discipline seem like two opposite things, right? Freedom, no restrictions, you can do whatever you want to. Discipline, a rigid system that you have to follow. And yet, everybody wants freedom. Everybody wants financial freedom. How do you get financial freedom? You got to have financial discipline. You got to save your money. You got to be, otherwise you're not going to have the freedom to be able to go spend it on what you want, or buy a new house, or buy a new car, or send your kid to the college that you want. It's the same thing. Time. Everyone wants time, free time. They want more free time. How do you get more free time? A disciplined time management system. It's the only way to get more free time. They seem like opposite directions, and yet the only pathway to freedom is through discipline. And as you said, doing the reps, doing it over and over and over again. That's the way to make it happen. On the battlefield for us, it gave us the ability. If Jocko was a ground force commander, I was an assault force commander, and he needed to tell another squad, if I'm tied up in the house over there and he said, hey, I need squad leader, take your guys and go clear that building over there. He didn't, that squad leader didn't need to tell me or Jocko how they were going to do it, who they were going to take with them. We knew how they were going to do it because we practiced it over and over and over again. We had very disciplined standard operating procedures that we followed. It also gave us the ability to give that guy, we could plug in another squad with him from the other platoon, and they were all doing the same thing because we had disciplined standard operating procedures that we followed. We had, how we got head counts, how we got in vehicles, how we got out of vehicles, how we cleared buildings, how we patrolled. And we did that, and we worked on those standard operating procedures, and we refined them all the time so they got better and better and better. And again, people would complain about it. I remember one night in particular, one of the rare nights we didn't have an operation, and I had an awesome platoon chief, Tony, who was been around for 20 years, incredible guy, and he was actually on Jocko podcast. If you've one of the episodes, if you listen to Jocko podcast, he's Tony was a guy, he just understood that we had to have these discipline standard operating procedures and why it was important. And so our operation for that night that we were planning got rolled, so we didn't have anything going on that night. One of the rare nights that we didn't have it. And he said, hey, everybody, jock up in your gear, clear and safe your weapons. We're going to patrol around the camp and work on some of our patrolling standard operating procedures. And people complained about it, and there was a lot of grumbling, and the reality was, okay, I know we kind of laughed about it. Okay, guys, you got some really important things to do, like max out on your bench press, play video games, or go to the chow hall, or watch movies on your DVD player. Look, none of that stuff's important. We got to do this. And we'd spent 45 minutes or an hour. We patrolled around the camp and we dialed in some awesome standard operating procedures and refined what we'd been doing. And it really kept guys alive, so that we were able to perform at a much higher level on the battlefield. And so that's what you have to do, is recognize that there might be some grumbling, there might be some complaining when you're driving those high standards, but you as a leader, you're not taking care of your people if you're not pushing them to do that. You have got to drive those standards, and you've got to make sure that they're disciplined, that they understand why they got to follow those standards, and that they also understand that we can make these standard operating procedures better. But at the end of the day, you've got to do the work. You've got to do the reps. There's no substitute for doing those reps, and whether it's 20 times through or even more, over and over and over again. It doesn't matter in the SEAL teams whether you're the brand new guy or the master chief that's been around for 30 years. You're going to have to do the reps. It's got to be repetitive training that sets you up for the realistic scenarios that you're going to go up against. So just remember, discipline equals freedom. If you want the freedom to excel at the highest level possible for your team on a personal level, you got to have the discipline to do the hard work to get there.
So this has been awesome. So we've got 20 minutes left. If you're on this call and you want to ask Leif a question, it's your last chance to submit it. Also, if you want to raise your hand, I think I might have time to unmute someone and just, bring in a raw question from the community. So raise your hand if you'd like to do it. I do want to go through some of the quotes that you guys shared. We talked about this. It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. There are no bad teams, only bad leaders. And, I think, when I first started reading this book, it was like, oh, I want to give this to this person. I want to give it to that person. And again, it's all about me. I need to do a better job of keeping it simple, much better job of not fire hosing people, giving people the bandwidth to implement, So, Leif, I do want to see if we can open it to the audience for questions, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, prioritize and execute, because I think that's another thing us leaders tend to do is we got people trying to do too many things at once, and we're not prioritizing and executing in a way that's effective. So any stories you could tell and any advice that you have, to give to business leaders?
Absolutely. On the battlefield, it doesn't matter. I don't care if you're the greatest, General George S. Patton Jr. or, the greatest battlefield leaders of history. You can't take on dozens of problems simultaneously. And when problems happen, they tend to compound, and they don't just happen one or two at a time, right? They happen like 4, 5, 10, 12, 20 at a time. And if you try to take on a dozen or more problems simultaneously, what happens? You fail at all of those tasks. So the only way that you can actually handle taking on a multitude of tasks simultaneously is to prioritize and execute. Prioritize, figure out what the highest priority is in the strategic picture, and then execute, get the team executing to accomplish that mission. And then you move on to the next task and the next task and the next task, and you keep prioritizing. And that's a critical aspect of on the battlefield. It's a critical aspect in the business world. When things are thrown at you and the pressure's on, you want to pull your hair out, and you've got some angry customer breathing down your neck, or a team that's leaning on you here, or a loan officer's leaning on you there, and it's all these things are compounding at the same time. How do you take on all those problems? You can't. You have to figure out what the highest priority is, and then execute toward that highest priority. And if you're down in the details, in the weeds, it's very difficult to figure out what that highest priority is. So how we teach our leaders to do that is to literally relax, look around, make a call. Relax, literally take a breath. Like, just calm down. You cannot make good decisions if you're getting emotional, if you're getting spun up. You can't make good decisions. So you have to force yourself to relax, even under great pressure. And you can imagine there's a lot of pressure on the battlefield. Look around, pull yourself back from the immediate tactical problems so you can actually get a little elevation to see around you. Okay, what's the biggest, highest priority item? And if you don't do that, it's easy to get lost. I do that all the time in our business, where I'm focused on some menial task that's important, but it's not near as important as some way bigger task that's going to be some huge opportunity for us that I'm not pursuing, or I'm failing to see because I got sucked into the minutia of this little detail and I didn't take a step back. So that look around piece is literally take a step back. In the military, it is, high port your weapon, gun pointed toward the sky, so that the boss man, the leader, has to take a step back and look around, and then make the call. Get the call, get out there to the team, communicate in a manner simple, clear, concise, so they get it, they understand it, and they're executing. Part of that too, when you're out there prioritizing and executing, you can't get target fixated because the battlefield is going to change rapidly. Same thing for your industry. There's going to be, there's what you're working on that's a priority. All of a sudden, a new priority comes in, and you're going to have to rapidly shift to that priority, get the team's efforts going there, and then maybe shift back once, once you've got that other high priority. So can't get target fixated. You have to be able to rapidly shift and prioritize and execute, and it changes all the time.
So, and you said some things I hope everybody caught. If you're, as a leader, you're too into the weeds, you're too on the front line, you're not going to be able to see it. So you got to get back, take a look at the priorities, and then focus the priorities one at a time. Tackle those things. And I do think we as leaders, myself especially, tend to jump into fire, start trying to solve it, and when I'm too low in the weeds, I'm missing the big picture. So that's great leadership. So again, folks, go ahead.
I was just going to add, there's going to be times when you have to step in. You have to solve fires. You have to put out those immediate fires and solve problems. But as soon as you get that problem the team getting executed, you got to step back, and your default position literally should be gun pointed to the sky. Back, step out of the details so that you can see where the next fire is going to be, and you can keep that strategic priority in mind.
Got it. So here's a question. I think this kind of fits under the bucket of decentralized command. And Danny Harani, who was at your event, he's one of the top loan officers in the country, good friend of MortgageCoach. But he said, can you speak on leading up the chain of command? When corporate has more of a checkbox type mentality. And by the way, we had another question earlier came in that, what about when you've got to lead someone that you really don't have any authority over? So if you could speak a little bit, around the box of decentralized command, a combination of people that you have no authority over, or people that are just, you're managing up. What advice do you have?
Absolutely, it's a great question, and folks like Danny. That's what I love about our Extreme Ownership Musters is having folks like Danny and so many others that are there to learn, to get better, and are going out and just crushing and doing great things. Leading up the chain of command is an incredibly challenging thing, but you just have to recognize that you actually can do. You have much more control over the relationship up the chain than you think you do. If you just sit back and say, well, that's my boss, he's in charge of me, how can I lead him or her, I can't do that. That's actually not true. I mean, it's easy to just get frustrated. It's easy to cast blame up the chain of command. In the Navy, we talk about drinking the haterade. And that's something I've been very guilty of, whether you're just drinking the haterade about, the boss doesn't get it, or the boss is way far away, or, the boss did this, but that was years ago, and they've forgotten about this, and they don't know what we're doing down here. The reality is, your boss wants you to succeed. So if you're having frustrations with getting your plans approved in a timely manner, with getting the resources dedicated to you that you think you need in order to accomplish your mission, or whatever it may be, or a new strategy or direction that you want to pursue, then whose fault is that? The boss wants you to win. So if the boss has questions about that and is not doing what you think they need to do, then you have to lead up the chain of command. And it's simply because if you know that this is going to be critical, that this is going to help your team, then you have to recognize that I got to do a better job of leading up the chain by communicating, by educating, by pushing information, by showing the boss about how we would go about executing this, and why it wouldn't exhaust resource or whatever it is, and why it's going to be critical, and how it's going to help these strategic initiatives that we're working on, and ultimately help us succeed overall. So that's what leading up the chain of command is all about, is that you just have to take a step back from, stop drinking the haterade and think about, okay, let me see the world through the boss's eyes, and let me understand, let me help explain to them why we need to do this. Now, you're not going to get everything you want, certainly, and everyone has limited resources. Even the SEAL teams, we absolutely have limited resources, but at least you'll get the answers when you ask those questions, recognizing that, hey, the boss wants me to win. We're all on the same team here, so let me help communicate why that's why we should go in this direction. And if that direction doesn't get going, again, you have to be, if you want to be a good leader, you also have to be a follower as well. That's part of that dichotomy. So at the end of the day, if your plan doesn't get approved, then you have to carry on with the plan that the boss decided on as if it were your own plan. But leading up the chain of command will help you tremendously to recognize that I don't care what kind of boss you work for. Something I learned from Jocko. I'm a pretty direct guy. I'm a headstrong guy. I'm very aggressive, and if I can see that this needs to be done, I want to get that done. And if there's people above me in the chain of command that maybe aren't as aggressive as me, it's easy for me to get frustrated and angry. And something that I learned from Jocko was I should try to have the same relationship with every single boss that I work for. Whether I have tremendous respect for them and will work for them again in a heartbeat, whether I have no respect for them and would never work for them again if I had the choice, I should try to have the same relationship with them. And that is that they trust me, they give me what I need to succeed, and they come to me and ask my opinion on things so that we can actually take this performance to the next level. I mean, that's what you're trying to do with any boss that you work for, is build that trust and confidence that they have in you.
That's great leadership. So we got 10 more minutes. I've got a couple big questions left, but I want to make sure we talk about the extreme muster, and I want to make sure we get a big group of mortgage coaches going to this. So folks, for the last one, a lot of mortgage folks were there. Josh Metal, one of the best mortgage coach professionals and one of the top loan officers in the country, was there. I referred Josh to it. He actually, texted me from the event, and it was just like, thank you, thank you, thank you. He was thanking me for making him aware of the event. And so, I mean, it really is something special. Danny Harani, who I've interviewed, 4 or 5 times, one of the best loan officers in the country, said it was just a complete game changer. So Leif, if you wouldn't mind giving everybody a highlight. I know you've got one coming up in New York. Tell us a little bit about it. Tell folks how to sign up for it, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. We've got the next Extreme Ownership Muster. It's Muster 002. This is our second ever one. It's going to be in New York City, May 4th and 5th. 2017, and just coming up here in a few months. We're super excited about it. I think we're going to probably sell out the tickets. So if you're interested in going, get online at extremeownership.com, or you can go to our website, echelonfront.com. That's ECHELONFRONT.com. Extremeownership.com will get you there as well. But it's the Muster 002. We've actually extended our early bird discount until Friday of this week. So after this week, the prices are going to go up, and it's an outstanding event. It's the best event I've ever been a part of. That one that Josh and Danny were at last year in San Diego. It was just, we had leaders from every different industry and a whole bunch of mortgage folks there as well. But you can learn from people from all over the place. And I had multiple people tell me that just meeting other participants at the muster and learning from them and talking to them and engaging with them was worth the price of admission. I had multiple people tell me that, and Jocko and I just have a tremendous time doing this. What we do in these events, we try to make it the opposite of what some of these some leadership conferences, some industries are like, where there's a keynote speaker who's kind of behind the curtain. Jocko and I are out in front of the curtain. We're engaging with people the whole time. There's a huge amount of Q&A. Everything from the 0445 that's AM workouts that we knock out, to events after work for happy hours or whatnot. I mean, we want to engage with people, talk to them, talk to leaders, aspiring leaders, folks that want to just take their performance to the next level.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And Andrew Paul, who's a good personal friend, another mortgage coach leader, he was on the interview that I did with Jocko, and I know he's one of your brothers. Again, when I asked Andrew about the event, he just like, Dave, there's just no words. He's like, there's no leadership like this, not just in our industry, but he couldn't really put words to how valuable he thought this experience would be for anyone that's interested in leadership. So I know
Andrew and I go way back. He's an amazing guy. We were swim buddies and buds for a time, and through our basically our demolition seal training, and certainly serving through TU Bruiser together. I think the world of Andrew, and love the great things that he's doing now in the mortgage industry.
Yeah, no, special guy, special event. So folks, if you're on, first of all, sign up. If you're on the fence and you want me to connect you with a mortgage coach leader that's been there, like Josh, Danny, or Andrew, let me know. Happy to hook you guys up. I want to see a lot of mortgage coach leaders go through this experience. I think, my goal is real simple. Every time a mortgage coach loan officer competes with an average loan officer, I want the mortgage coach loan officer to crush the competition. Every family deserves a mortgage coach experience. And every time a mortgage coach loan officer competes with someone who's not a mortgage coach loan officer, I want that loan officer to win. Obviously, we provide a tool and a piece of technology, but success is so much more than that. You guys need to, this extreme ownership mentality is just pivotal to maximizing your success. If you have read the book, but you haven't watched or listened to the audiobook, I highly recommend it. Super powerful. Like I said, I've never done an audiobook. I did my first one over the past 2 weeks. I do think that other audiobooks probably won't be as awesome because I hear that the author's not always the one reading it. Having you and Jocko duel back and forth as you kind of broke down, you told military stories, you talked about things you learned from the SEALs, but then you brought them into business. You said, hey, this is how it relates to business. This is the principle we learned. I mean, it was incredible. So the dichotomy of leadership. I want to close with 2 questions. One, I want to talk about patience. Phil Black, who's another former Navy SEAL, someone I've interviewed a number of times. He's a good friend of mine. He wanted me to talk about patience, and how much patience do you give? I mean, sometimes change doesn't happen as quickly as we want it to. So any advice you have on, giving patience?
Definitely. I think, particularly leading up the chain of command where we were just previously talking about, I mean, any of those things like that, you got to be playing for the long game. Definitely. You got to be playing for the long game. And that patience is critical. If you're trying to get an organization to change direction, implement some new technology, adjust their tactics, it's not going to happen overnight. If there's 12 things you want to change, start with 2. Start with 2 things. It's you can't do it all at once. So you got to have patience, and it's one of those things that, training. It takes a while to see the results of performance. One of the things we learned in the Battle of Ramadi, we were going and taking on a whole bunch of risks and doing a lot of different stuff that other people thought was crazy, and there was some question. People questioned the strategy and whether or not it would work, and it ended up being amazingly successful strategy, and it was all based on. But it took a while for people to actually see that this strategy was actually look at the impact that it had over time. So you got to have that tactical patience, we call it in the military, is very important, and particularly when leading up the chain, getting your team to work together on the same page, building relationships with folks, using cover move, learning how to prioritize and execute, and developing a good training plan that allows you to do that. It takes patience because those things are not going to happen overnight. The benefits from that will take some time to be seen, but have patience and you'll definitely see the results.
Love it. So Muddy, we had some challenges on Facebook Live, so we didn't have the visual notes going. Muddy, if you don't mind sharing the screen, show us where we're at with the visual notes that you put together. And then, folks, we will make a PDF. Thank you, buddy. Thank you, buddy. We will put a PDF link available in the recording. So if you're listening to the recording of this interview, there'll be a link to these visual notes in that summary. Again, I would love to know what notes you took. So we're going to post this also on our Facebook page. Let us know your favorite takeaways from today's call. Let us know your favorite quotes. If you do end up signing up for the next muster, be sure to let me know. I want to know who the mortgage coach leaders are going. I'm also going to put it on my calendar and try to be there. I know you guys are going to do more of these. I will definitely be at a muster in 2017. So any final words of wisdom as we wrap up today's call, Leif?
First of all, I just appreciate the opportunity, and it's great to talk to all of you guys. And I think Mortgage Coach is an outstanding organization here. And I think this idea of trying to learn and grow and implement new technologies and new tactics and educate yourself all the time is an incredible thing. That's really the mark of the best folks in any industry on the battlefield. It's the same thing. It's the marks of the best leaders that are out there. and you'll go forward. And I think the best thing that you can do, the last thought I'll leave you with, is just apply it to yourself. Apply it to you. That's the most important piece of it.
Well, thank you so much for your service to our country. I am grateful for the freedom we have for folks like you, Jocko, Andrew, anybody on this call who's served our country. Super grateful for you being here. And thanks for the time, Leif, to give value. These guys are some of the best speakers on leadership in the country. Personally, I think Extreme Ownership is one of the 5 most important leadership books anybody can read. The concept of just extreme ownership and owning your results from the top down. I mean, I just can't think of a bigger concept to own as a leader. So hopefully you guys go through this experience. Hopefully you got value from today's call. Please let us know what you thought of today's call. Did we wow you and surpass your expectations with value and engagement? You know, if you're a guest to this call and you want to learn more about Mortgage Coach, pick the last option. But by the way, Leif, it looks like we rocked it out. We delivered on value to the call. Thank you so much, my friend. I look forward to our next conversation, and hopefully I'll see you on the road this year.
Looking forward to it, Dave. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you, buddy.